Hello and welcome to Moving Beyond Stigma. I am your host, Michelle Crossman, and this is episode 5. Every episode, we are here to talk about all things mental health, and today I'm honored to welcome Chantelle Sands, who is a registered therapist from Fireweed Healing. Welcome, Chantelle.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for having me today.
Of course, I am so excited. There is something that I would just love to share before we get started. One, that we are in completely different time zones right now. um, and we've never actually met in person. And I found you honestly just by browsing different mental health websites because I do that in my spare time sometimes. Just to see who's out there. And I'm just fascinated at what people put out there. And I came across your website, Fireweed Healing, and was just drawn in immediately. And one of the things that drew me in was a little quote that was underneath the title. And it read that fireweed is the first plant to return to the land after the devastation of a forest fire, regenerating the soil for new life to grow. A reminder that beauty can show up in the most unexpected places. Fireweed Healing aims to provide a nurturing environment for you to return to yourself and blossom. When I read that, I got goosebumps. And
Oh, I'm so
that,
glad.
along with so much other information that you had on your website, is 100% the reason why I reached out to you and really just felt like we should have a conversation. I just kind of trusted my gut on that one and wanted to chat with you. So, thank you so much again for joining me today. Very excited to chat. So, before we get started and into all of the questions, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and I guess what brought you into wanting to work in the field of therapy?
Yes, of course. First, thank you. I'm so honored and glad that that really spoke to you. I fully created my website, and all of those are just personal touches that I've
Yeah.
put in there. And that's really what I'm hoping for, is that when people look at it, that the right people will be drawn in. So thank you. Um, yeah, so I have always known that I wanted to be a therapist. I started my own therapy quite young. At the age of 16, I
Mm.
was really going through a hard time. I'd moved out of my house. I was dealing with a lot of my own pain and my own trauma. And I had started working for the first time with a therapist that really, really made a difference in my life. And it was a long, hard struggle to get to the place that I'm at now. And so, quite within the first year, I think between the age of 16 and 17, I was like, no, this is what I want to do.
Mm.
And so, at the age of 18, I did a 1 year certificate program. I had talked to the therapist and said, I want to do this. I'd already been a support person in so many people's lives already.
Mm.
Um, and so was naturally sort of doing support work and holding space for people already. And they had recommended to me to try out the 1 year program at the community college, and started doing support work. Ended up working at the same program that had helped me so much.
Mm.
And I really was supported by the many communities that I was involved in and participated in, and stayed working for that organization for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Um, and other various community organizations around the Yukon. So I um, really got to experience supporting a wide variety of people, and then made my way to Vancouver, and now here I am.
I love that. That's definitely, I guess, like a full circle moment for you, going on that journey from getting what you need and then learning that you want to help others as well. And then just following that path into what you're doing now. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, it's been um, it really does feel like my calling, my
Hmm.
passion, and I haven't really slowed down since I started.
I
Yeah.
think that means you're definitely in the right path there. Just giving it your all, and it's giving you so much, I can imagine, in return as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's been really, really amazing to be in the field for so long, coming from a smaller community as well. Um, just when I was back home at Christmas time, I ran into somebody I'd worked with like years ago, many, many years ago.
Yeah.
We, and it's so beautiful and amazing to like get to have these tiny interactions, or even if it's just like a smile and a head nod, knowing that they're out there doing
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I love that so much. And community is so important, especially when it comes to mental health and just having any kind of support, whether that's, well, community can be so many different things. Again, it can be a center, it can be family, friends, could be the people you work with. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and that part can be so easily overlooked, unfortunately. Like, I feel like sometimes we forget how important that is and what a difference that can make.
Yeah, yeah. And um, I mean, community in exactly in so many different ways. Like it can mean so many different things, and the healing that can take
Hmm.
place in community as well. That it's um, the term therapy or therapeutic can mean so many different things
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily have to be a one-on-one sitting in an office or on a Zoom call as it is usually now.
exactly.
That's
Yeah.
definitely part of it, but there's so much more to it.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. That's great. Having queer, feminist, anti oppressive, and decolonial practices is incredibly important to you. That's definitely something you mentioned a lot within your website. Um, and that's something I very much respect because it's so important. And especially with something that is like the therapist, psychological community, a lot of that has been so whitewashed for so long, and there's a lot of hindrance that comes with that. So yeah, reading that on your website as well, I was like, we need to chat about this a little bit, definitely. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and how has using these approaches like really affected your practice.
Yeah, it does. It feels so important, hard to define,
Yeah.
because really what we're looking at, we live in this Western culture. It's very patriarchal. Um, it's really focused on capitalism. It's really
Mm-hmm.
not, which is really based on keeping certain groups down to lift others up. Um,
Yeah.
and in so much of my studies, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and it was very independent. And it really looked at what am I doing? What are the just immediate family, self? How do we fix this? And without zooming out at all of society and how we're all being affected by these structures that are extremely damaging,
Mm-hmm.
these structures that are keeping people in boxes, that are really keeping certain groups of people down, um, and it's pathologizing. It's blaming the person for struggling in a world that isn't set up for them. Um,
Yeah.
and I have experienced this myself.
Mm-hmm.
I have many different intersecting identities that have made life harder for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've witnessed it in my own social circles, and my own personal social circles. I witness it with the clients that I work with as well. Um, and I hear it in the messaging of like, I just don't know why I can't do better. I just don't know why I'm struggling. I look around and everybody else seems like they've got everything together. And I'm like, but no, like we need to be able to relate to the context, the social context as well. Yeah, so it's felt really important to me to I bring this into my work. Working from an equity framework,
Mm-hmm.
um, as well has been extremely important to me. I also wouldn't be here today if I wasn't if I didn't have the opportunities and access.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, it can be so difficult. I grew up in a small town, and then I did go to therapy as a kid, but it was like very much I don't want to go. Like so
right,
I was very stubborn about it. So it doesn't really count that much because I didn't really like do it. It wasn't there. I wasn't ready to work yet at the
right.
time. But then as I got older and was like, oh no, I really, I want to do these things. I want to find what's right for me. And then you start looking around and how inaccessible so much of it is.
Yeah.
And then as a queer person as well, myself, like looking for something that and someone that I can speak to that can also relate on that, and because
Yes.
so much of, my identity and my trauma gets intertwined with that one piece of me. And that's just one piece, and so
Hmm.
many people have so many pieces that are not being looked at,
Right.
as the whole picture. And it's hard to find somebody or a group scenario, group settings where you can relate to multiple people on multiple levels and feel safe. It's not just the textbook, this is what it should be,
Yes.
westernized, whatever. Like there's so much more to it. Especially then when you start going into the different cultures as well. Like, you know, that basic therapy like isn't going to be helpful for everybody
Hmm.
because it doesn't take that into consideration.
Yeah. And I really look at the how problematic it can be, also coming from a small town as well, where there wasn't a
Mhm.
ton of diversity,
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot of inclusivity as well, and so there were parts of me that couldn't come out as well.
Mhm.
And I definitely found a place of belonging, inclusivity in rave culture, um,
Mhm.
as well. And those each one of these intersecting parts of your identity, they all have their own stories attached onto them. And when we're working with people, we're working with the whole person. We're not
Yeah.
just working with one small part of them. And I think it's really important to be able to mold and adapt and to go with the flow of what the person is bringing to the table.
Yeah, definitely. 'Cause the human experience is so complicated.
Totally, totally.
Yeah. Oh, I love
Yeah,
that a lot because, yeah, so much of that I just feel like needs to be addressed so much more. And like it is, to some extent, like I see a
right.
lot of people talking about it and sharing about it, which I think is amazing. It's taught me a lot as well. Um, like from the outside looking in and seeing all these different um, places and services that actually are offered, but you have to look so hard to find them,
Right.
which is not fair, like it should be so much more accessible. Um, yeah, like it shouldn't, take doom scrolling for you to be able to find what you need,
Yeah.
um, yeah, or even like going to your whoever family doctor or whatever, they're only going to know what they're told, which is, oh, I guess I'll put you here because this is in a hospital, or we'll do this group because that's what, but they wouldn't ever take in consideration the different aspects of your identity and where you're from and who you are unless you really push that forward with them.
Yeah, it's really interesting to sort of sitting on the other side. Um, I I came with a lot of life experience. I came with a lot of
Hmm.
work experience, and then I did the master's program. And um, being in a huge urban setting where there's like thousands of counselors out there, and there's a lot of criteria of what um, and language as well
Mm.
around sort of which trainings do you have, which modalities do you work from, and a lot of it, it's a very specific type of language that it's been really difficult to try and navigate.
Mm.
Well, some of this is from not from textbooks, it's from my own life
Exactly.
experience, it's from my own experience sitting on the side that of the client. Um, I never do anything with my clients that I haven't experienced myself as
Mm-hmm.
well. And I'm really focused on building the relationship with them and creating that safe space. And I'm not following a specific step A, step B, step C.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
it's
I love that. I
yeah.
guess this would be, or correct me if I'm wrong, of course, but would this be like the person-centered practice? Like, would that be kind of what you mean by that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's a bit of all of it. So, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the sort of these fancy words that are on there and like queer, feminist, anti-oppressive, person-centered. I like to think about that as a bit of clinical jargon.
Yes, for sure.
Uh, and really, what's underneath that is a set of values of I'm really working with the whole person when I'm working with them, and I'm really focused on building these relationships, building these strong, healthy relationships where the person can come in and like what we're dealing with is a lot of the time really sensitive, really vulnerable, really coming from a place of like potentially a lot of shame. And to be able to work with those parts, that person needs to feel really safe. And
Yeah.
it's such an honor for me to get to sit there and witness and to be with them and to hold that space with them. Um, of and I've always known this working in the field of like, wow, like some of these people are coming in and I get to see parts of them that the rest of the world doesn't. Um,
Yeah.
and it's so incredible, and it's always awe inspiring. It never gets old. And also welcoming in the whole person.
Mm.
And so I'm not saying um, I don't deal with that, go somewhere else. And I'm also saying I really want you to practice autonomy. And if it doesn't feel like this is working, or you've gotten as much as you can out of our space and time together, then I'll help you find somebody else. And so
Mm.
anybody who comes to my door, I really don't want to send them away. I'm making sure let's do what we can with what we have right now.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, that's so important too. Like, I guess encouraging um the ability of choice,
yeah,
for the clients, and saying like, yes, you're here for them. And this is a safe space for them, and also recognizing this space might not be where they need to be always. They might have that next step, which is a wonderful thing. That means they
yes,
got what they needed from you on that part of their journey, and they're moving on to the next part of their journey. Or maybe they're not quite ready for you yet and they need to go somewhere else and then come back.
totally.
And it's always different depending
Yeah,
on the person and where they're at. The one thing that I've always kind of I struggled with a lot of the, like, I guess, lower cost sessions that, like, I've done a couple times, which were great when, finances are extra tight and all of that.
yeah.
And but then they were always like set sessions of like, oh, it's 8 weeks, oh, it's 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that felt so limiting because it is, you know. But I was extremely lucky at one point. We have a center here in Toronto, the 519, and it's an amazing community center for queer people, and people of color. And they very much, uh, they put in a lot of work to provide different services for free.
Amazing.
So which is incredible. So right before pandemic, I ended up going there and getting into one of their programs, which was an 8-week therapy session. But the therapist I had was actually really incredible and ended up adding in a couple extra
Fabulous.
for me because it was needed, and they saw that, and they very much wanted to, give me again that choice of like, would you like to come back one or two more times so we feel a little bit more finished, and we can get through to that, next step. Which I knew that they did not have to do that,
Right.
right? But they were someone who took the job and made it about the people, exactly like you're doing, and gave that little bit extra, which it was only 1 or 2 more days, 1 or 2 more hours. But for me, I like in that moment is everything, just
Yeah.
have somebody and say, I see you. Let's do a little bit more instead of saying, sorry, the system says this. I can't do anything else.
Yeah. Well, and those 1 or 2 hours, we never know. Like, we don't know
Hmm.
what you're going to get out of that 1 or 2 hours. Like, those
Exactly.
aha moments, sometimes they surprise you too. I walk into all sessions. I don't know what's going to come out of those sessions or if you're going to have an aha moment or what you're going to take away from them because it's so
Yeah.
deeply personal. Um, and I also had it's been very difficult for me to sit on the other side as well in these urban settings
Hmm.
because I accessed free mental health care for most of my life. The Yukon has quite good access to mental health
Hmm.
care. So coming to Vancouver, and I actually went through a bit of a culture shock of how limited some of the things can be. And when you're doing some of that deeper work and really facing some of these really deep seated places, we need time and space, and we don't want to feel rushed.
Yeah.
Either we want, I hope, um, that we can allow the time and space to do the exploratory work, to ground in together, to establish the safety. It's really
Hmm.
hard to do that in 8 sessions.
Oh, definitely. It takes quite a while to like build the relationship where you are comfortable enough, to let down the extra walls that you have up, actually speak honestly,
Mm-hmm.
and openly, and then, let the dynamic flow a little bit more naturally. And it takes a
Mm-hmm.
while to figure out if it's going to work or not. Like, I've definitely
Absolutely.
had a couple therapists, like, post COVID, I was like, okay, got to get into it. Let's get this healing going. And the first person I had, I liked her. I was like, okay, like, she's cool. And then after a couple sessions, I realized that I was being dismissed constantly. And it was subtle, but I was like, oh, that's not actually helpful. And then I had to be like, that's not what I need, and she was great in some areas,
Mm-hmm.
but there was one area that was just so, and it was a very big one for me, but that area she just would so quickly turn it into something else.
Mm,
And I was like, and again, it was just very much like her thought process.
right.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, that's how you feel, that's how you think, that's fine for you. But she never opened it up for me. So then I was like, okay, this isn't going to work. And then I had to, go through that emotional roller coaster of like, okay, I just spent all this time and this money with this person and it didn't work out. Now I have to go
Right.
search and find somebody new. Which can be disheartening, but when you do find the right person and you do find that good connection, it is so, honestly, I think it's beautiful. Like, I have a therapist now who I absolutely adore, and she's so sweet. And she just, I feel seen, like I feel like a human
Yes.
being, not a
Yes.
client. I feel like a human, which
No.
I think that's incredibly important. And like with how you're speaking and talking about your practice, that very much sounds like what you do and what you prioritize, and like even though they are clients, you see them as humans and as people, there's so much more than that. And I think
Yeah.
that is incredibly important to highlight. And um, we need so much more of that, and I feel like that's something that is starting to grow a little bit within therapy field, at least from what I've seen, and what I've heard from others as well, and what I've looked at. Um, that seems to be there seems to be like a little bit of a light shining there on just a little bit of a shift in the way that therapy is now being practiced, that is a little bit more human like instead of to clinical.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
that that's the shift that we are going on. Um, I, yeah, I think it hurts my heart a little bit when if I hear I've heard of people's experiences
Mm-hmm.
in the mental health field, or like accessing care, clients accessing care. I'm reminded often that there's still a lot of work to do,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's going to be continuing of the learning and unlearning process, um, with new practitioners,
Yes.
and getting comfortable. And I really approach my work as not being the expert, um, and I really pull on people's strengths, as well, and really try and view things collaboratively.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always what people are looking for as
Yeah,
well.
that's true.
Um, I There was something that you said in there that I was like, oh yeah, I want to touch on this. Oh, it's being aware of my own biases as well,
Yes.
and places that I, um, either I'm if I have a strong bias in a certain stance, I will often let that be known.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm constantly checking in with my clients to see how are we doing? Are you getting what you need? Is there something that I'm like struggling with, or that I have a bias that I'm not going to be able to shift my opinion on this?
Mm-hmm.
And can you access what you need somewhere else then? Um,
Yes.
yeah. And I love that. I love that you pointed that out of, being like, oh no, I just like kept kind of running into this wall with this therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And because we all have different biases
Oh,
based off of
definitely.
our life
Yes, exactly.
experiences. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And I feel like that's a normal part of it. And then, yeah, like you said, it's just about checking in, like as a patient and as a therapist, like just both of you, checking in to make sure that the relationship can work because we will have different life experiences and different opinions and thoughts and all of these things. And that can be really beautiful because it can also sometimes open your mind or challenge a thought process, which can, open you to learn more, which I love. But sometimes it is a little bit on the stronger side. And then maybe you can't or won't shift for whatever reason, and you don't necessarily
yeah.
even have to provide it, but letting that dialogue move and be open so that you can both kind of decide and talk about that and be like, okay, is this
Yeah.
something that we can move forward with? Or is it actually going to get in the way?
Yeah. Well, and as a client, I'm like, I love that you were able to check in with yourself, and that you didn't have to do the extra work,
Mm-hmm.
either, of being like, this isn't working. Like, something didn't feel right. You practice your own autonomy and said, no, this feels yucky. We'll go
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, also feels important,
Definitely.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Autonomy is so big. I actually recently finished reading a book, Embodied Healing,
Mm.
and its focus is yoga, like trauma informed yoga practice, which I've always been fascinated about because I am a mover and a dancer, and I've done lots of yoga, and like I have a huge um, connection to my body with my healing,
Right.
like so that's a big part of me and always has been. And then I got interested in this book because I also know things like that can be extremely triggering for people. So I just, I saw this book and I was like, I'm just very fascinated on how they're going to approach this. And the whole book was just filled with all these different stories from different facilitators and clients. And they all gave their different experiences, but every single story talked about autonomy and choice
Yes.
and how important
Yes.
that was. And as even as a dance teacher, and I teach kids as well, and I'm like, just making sure that they have choice, and it's not, I'm not, yes, I'm teaching them choreography and whatever, but I'm not telling them who they are as a person. I'm not dictating their every breath and move. Like I
Right.
can't, like that's not fair.
Yeah.
They're children and they need to have fun. Like, uh, and like finding that balance. So I found it very interesting. So autonomy has been coming up a lot lately, at least on my end. Within that book and then like this conversation and then even myself and thinking about the choices that I have, and like making sure people in my life have choices, and like all the different relationships, and just really realizing how important that is and how much it affects us when we don't feel like we have a choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see, I'm so glad to hear these spaces, sort of like dance spaces, movement spaces, um, taking on a bit more of a trauma informed lens,
Mm-hmm.
um, and how important and how integral it is, and how I think I'm, because of my training, because of my work experience, my life experience, I'm very hyper aware of it. So I can feel it when I walk into a space.
Yeah.
Um, that is their choice here. How much power are we giving to the people that we're working with? And coming from that queer, feminist, anti oppressive practice, um, it really is about choice, and it's really about giving the power back to the clients and the people that we're working
Mm-hmm.
with. Whether they're small children where they
Yeah.
get to practice, and figuring out how much space we can give people and giving the power back to them, because we really do live in a world that we're often told what to do.
Yeah.
And I think about this with sort of these sort of formal education places,
Mm-hmm.
schools. We're told when to eat, when to,
Yes.
where to be, when to exercise,
Yep.
and then we get to the other side and we're like, hey, wait a minute, I don't know how to do this on my own. Somebody else has
Yeah.
always told me,
Yeah.
and so wherever I can get like these little bits in here of like, no, I want you to choose. This
Yes.
is a safe space that you get to figure out what you like, and the embodiment practice.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very simple, profound experience last year where I'd been somatic, sort of somatics and somatic therapy was
Mm-hmm.
newer to me. And I'd worked in the field of trauma and addictions for a long time, and substance use, and had done many, many hours of talk therapy and EMDR and all of these things. And the somatic bit, I was like, this one's harder for my brain to grasp. And then there was a very simple moment that I had during like a meditative journey, and sort of this little message that came through that was just said, this is what a yes feels like. This is what a yes
Mm.
feels like in your body. And I was like, oh, like that was like profound.
Yeah.
And so I encourage people to get to tune in of like, no, your body has a ton of messages for you.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And learning how to listen to it
Mm-hmm.
is actually incredibly difficult when you haven't really had that, your whole life. And like, especially bringing up like the school system and all of that, it is so scheduled, and
Mm-hmm.
the expectations are so specific, that you're
Yeah.
supposed to follow. And I grew up dancing, and everything was so specific and
Yes.
rigid in the scheduling. And then it wasn't until I was an adult and it was like, hey, you can freestyle, you can do this. And I was like, what? I didn't know. And I was like, I've been a dancer my whole life and I don't understand because no one's telling me what to do right now. And I was lost.
Yeah.
And I felt so confused,
Yes.
and I'm
Yes.
like, huh. And like now that I've gotten through that and like understood that now as a teacher, that's why I try very hard to implement that, because I'm like, I see what it did to me, and it like affected my life as a whole,
Yeah.
like waiting for someone to tell me what to do. And I'm
Absolutely.
like, I could tell myself what to do, like wait a minute, I can figure this out. Yeah, and I feel like again that's something that's being a little bit more talked about and actually used in spaces, whether it's like free time here or different variables in classes that you can do so that there's something. And then again, like even parental figures or whoever, like just making sure that the child has time that is not scheduled.
Yes.
Like, of course, scheduling is important to a certain degree. You have to learn how to do things and learn what you want to do. Um, and eat, of course, and like do all those, there's things that do have to be scheduled, but making sure there's time to just exist and let the kids make choices so that they know how to do that by the time they're older. And then, life gets a little bit easier, hopefully. You can make those choices for yourself and understand what that means instead of being in your 30s, 40s, 50s, being like, I've never made a choice for myself. I've never listened to my body before, because that is so
Yeah,
real.
exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of what I'm doing often or I'm thinking about is balance.
Hmm.
And it's such a simple word and we use it all the time, but um, I'm often thinking about how many things are neutral. So we're just like scheduling is okay. It's okay to
Yeah.
have a schedule.
Yeah.
And then we'll often grasp onto it and say, okay, well, where do we need to loosen? And as life comes at us, because it does,
Hmm.
we'll start to grasp onto other areas. And so the balance isn't a thing that we just one day establish and we figure out the exact formula for it. It's constantly moving.
Exactly. Yeah. And we just kind of have to shift with it and move with it, and yeah, do our best to just be kind to ourselves along the way, which is
Yes.
also hard.
Yeah, and so when I'm working with people, I'm thinking again, the sort of one size doesn't fit all, because
Hmm.
everybody's at a different place and
Yeah.
everybody's learning how to balance different things that are sort of go-to spots that we need um, to focus on is going to be different for everybody. And so I
Yeah.
really focus in of like, what do you need?
Yeah.
What makes you feel the best? Where do you need to show up? Um, in different areas, which parts of your life are need more nurturing spaces and more compassion and um, yeah.
Yeah, I really love that. It's so important to just take, I think, some time for everybody just to kind of sit with ourselves sometimes and just kind of check in, like you would with a boss or a friend or a relationship. You know what I mean? Like just check in with yourself and be like, okay, how am I feeling? Like, what is my body saying to me? Like our body does speak so much. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a
Mm-hmm.
very stressed out person all of the time. And anytime I like go to like the chiropractor, they're like, Michelle, relax. I'm like, I am. They're like, no, you're not. Like, oh, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. Like we hold tension in so many places. Our,
Yeah.
like our internal organs also get affected by literally everything. Like, like our bodies tell us so much, and they also tell us when things are safe. And when we should say yes to things, when it will be helpful. You just have to
Yeah.
like sit back and listen. And learning how to actually do that is, I think, extremely difficult, especially with the constant stimulation of the world.
Yes. Yes.
That's just a whole other thing on top of it. But, taking space away from it when you can and just touching base with your body, with your mind, and like just trying to feel for a little bit. So then when you do go into sessions or you go into work or you go into wherever, like, what you need, or at least have a basic idea of what you need. You might need help with someone, from someone to help kind of get you there fully, of course, and help pull it
Yeah.
out, but you can at least kind of have that base, um, and just start that journey from somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
safe and calm, and that, because, we're, I guess, like the professionals of ourselves, like we know ourselves the best. Like
Yes.
we know our bodies, we know when something doesn't feel right, even if you don't necessarily have the words for it. But you can still feel it and maybe say, okay, this feels off right now, I don't know why, and then
Mm-hmm.
someone can help out within that space.
Yeah, and there's a reconnection piece. I think partially because our society we're not built to tune in.
Mm-hmm.
There are things everywhere that are encouraging us to tune out,
Exactly.
whether it's social media, having music on in the background. I live in an urban setting. There's traffic and lights and shiny
Yes.
things, and
Yes.
we're getting constant information all the time, and in the rat race all the time too, where we're needing more information,
Mm-hmm.
more products, more everything. And so part of the therapeutic space gets to be just getting to sit down and slow down and take a moment and be in this space together, and be like, okay, we where do we want to go? How do we want to spend our time? What needs to show up? Um, and it gets to be an hour that you set aside where you're
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not asking you more or where to be or what to do, and you get to decide.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever goal you have, like that you're planning to reach, like you can get there however quickly or slowly you need. Like there's no timeline for that, and having the safe space to just sit in it and
Mm-hmm.
figure it out. You don't have to have all the answers. That's what the space is for, is to kind of help get there safely,
Yeah.
within a relationship that you feel good and trust. And yeah, I love that you as the client, the person, the human makes that choice,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're there to support them as they make those choices and help them along the way and kind of like emotionally hold their hand, and keep them
Yeah,
safe and supported.
it's definitely what I love about the job.
Mm.
And I think I want, I think we really live in a culture that talks about like quick fixes
Yes.
as well. And I don't know if I believe in quick fixes
Mm.
either. I think the money part of things can make things a little bit more difficult, which is why
Yes.
I have made like a sliding scale, and I follow that, and I work heavily with the indigenous population as well, where there's some funding there, where we have a
Mm-hmm.
bit more opportunity, because I don't want finances to be a barrier. And as soon
Yeah.
as you start putting money and value and into the mix, it starts to change things up a bit, which
Mm-hmm.
can be complicated and difficult to navigate,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
there's value and worth attached onto that then as
Yeah.
well. Um, and so it's starting to deconstruct some of that.
Yeah.
Feels very complicated at times too.
Oh, definitely. I can imagine. Like, yeah, because there's like certain rules and regulations and all of these things that make it tricky. But you, of course, want to like do as much as you can to help those who need it, because you should. That's the job, right? So like that's what you should be wanting to do.
Yeah.
And just finding that balance and being able to open up the space for as many people who need it as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not an easy thing to do.
No, you have to
No.
very fine balance, and it's
Yeah,
constantly shifting.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of just have to always be ready to shift and move with it. And yeah, because honestly, yeah, it's hard. And like I've experienced that as well, where like you're like, okay, yeah, like I should be in therapy right now, but it's that or groceries. I probably should pick groceries just because, I need to eat. Uh, and that's ridiculous. Like when you think about that, like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, accessibility in general, I
Mm-hmm.
think, to mental health, and therapy, and being able to meet the clients where they're at. Um, that's what we're trained, that's what we're taught. And there, I think you can see it with different organizations who are doing more of the frontline work, who are working with
Yes.
um, more marginalized populations, um, and it's tough work,
Mm-hmm.
and the burnout rates are high. A lot of the time, the staff are overworked.
Yep.
It's often, and that was most of the first 10 years of my career was working those jobs,
Mm-hmm.
doing the frontline work. A lot of it's doing like immediate support,
Yeah.
more crisis work. It's very draining. It's very hard on the system. It can be quite
Yeah.
heartbreaking at times as well. Um,
Definitely.
and and it just shows how much more of it we need, how much more funding we
Mhm.
need to be able to keep these going, how much more training we need. And some of
Yeah.
the best parts of those jobs was that it was really peer led a lot of the time.
Mm.
A lot of the staff they don't have a master's degree.
Yeah.
It's people with life experience who've been there, who want to
Yeah.
give back, who are kind and caring and loving and supporting, and some of the best counselors that I've seen who don't have the master's degree
Right. Yeah.
and who are just kind, loving, good-hearted humans who
Mm.
have empathy and compassion.
That's exactly what it is. Again, going all the way back to community, right? Like that is what that becomes. And I think that gets again left behind sometimes. Like the urgency of what's actually needed there, it's just so easily forgotten,
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
wild because it's so necessary all of the time and
Yeah,
everywhere, like we need it so much. But yeah, like the reality is it is extremely draining and takes a lot out of the people who are helping and doing the counseling or volunteering or whatever it is. Like it's going to take a lot. So when you don't have enough people and resources to even help the people who are doing the volunteering
yeah, yeah.
or the counseling, like then how do you let that trickle down to the people who need the help? Like it's just, yeah, it's very, very difficult. And obviously, I feel like one of many of our hopes and dreams of the future is that it's less, straining on the people who are there to help down the road so that then they can give more to those who need it.
Yeah, and I hope that and I think the having conversations like this,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I think a lot from my experience, we need these large structural changes. And
Yeah.
that can start in these micro ways
Yeah.
through these conversations, um, and we need more support for the people doing the frontline work.
Yeah.
As well, and those people who don't have a master's degree who really are working in community all the time. There's lifers who are doing that work,
Mm-hmm.
and they also need to be recognized as
Yeah.
well. Um, and my hope is that other therapists, the ones who've gone through and done their master's programs, or that and they haven't been involved or witnessed or got to see the beauty in those communities as well,
Yeah.
have an opportunity to experience that. Because
Mm-hmm.
when we're sitting in our offices, and we're working with clients one on one, and we're really distanced from
Mm.
really getting to witness, and I think there can be a lot of biases, or not understanding when you haven't been a part of the culture before. You haven't got to
Definitely.
witness firsthand
Yeah.
um, the strengths that come in community.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel very fortunate because of my own lived experience of being a member of different communities, um, and getting to witness, um, and be a part of and be a member of some of these more marginalized communities,
Yeah.
that there's a lot of fear around, and there is a lot of stigma, and there's a lot of biases that come up. And
Mm.
I've also got to witness people taking care of one another.
Yeah. And that's so beautiful. Like having, honestly, like I feel like having that very integrated community and clinical combination as a
Mhm.
therapist is probably so incredibly powerful, because when you're doing the studying and the researching and all of that, like, yes, you are learning a lot, but there's so much that you're going to miss because you're not
Yeah,
in it, like you said, and
totally.
taking the time to be in it, whether it happens to be life experience for yourself or taking the time to step away from the office, step away from the clinical side, and integrate
Yeah,
yourself
yeah.
and do the hands on work. So, you as a therapist, psychiatrist, whoever, can just like be in it and see the magic of the support and the community,
Mm,
and
yes,
then bring that back into the practice later. Like, that would be absolutely incredible and
yeah.
so
Oh, and
beneficial.
it's such a humbling, I think,
Yeah.
as well. Getting to step
Yeah.
out and getting to, I don't know if we ever really get to take off our professional hat completely,
Yeah.
but there's something really, really humbling about getting to walk into these spaces as not the
Mm.
professional, as not the expert,
Yeah.
and getting to witness, getting to learn
Yeah.
from community too.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
just learning in a different way, which is, I think, really beautiful,
yeah,
and can help so many people just to get a different view and understand, again, just the human experience in a different way. Yes. I feel like I could keep talking for
totally.
7 more hours. But I feel like we should wrap it
Yeah.
up.
Yes.
But that was that was a very moving conversation. So
Mhm.
thank you so much for sharing that, and sharing a bit of your experiences and what it's like, honestly, from your point of view, to do what you do and how you do it. And I think you are the type of professional that people, at least from my point of view, might be a biased opinion, but that's okay. Would the type of therapist that people would, hope for, and look for. Again, as someone who specifically, like, I am an artist, so I am very like in. I work very intuitively and all of that kind of stuff. So, like, having that connection with who I work with so closely on something that's so personal is important to me. Um, Other people, of course, will have other things that are like their top, you know,
Right.
need, so we need a little bit of everything for everybody. But I definitely feel that a lot of people must very much appreciate what you do. And as someone who does appreciate it, I want to thank you for what you do. It is very much incredible, the work that you are doing. So thank you again for sharing a little bit of yourself with us here today.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. This is my first podcast that I've
Ooh,
done. So
exciting.
thank you. It has been a very good experience.
I'm so
Um,
glad. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Chantelle, for joining us. This is Moving Beyond Stigma. My name is Michelle Crossman, and until next time.